Welcome to Pocket Pulp. This week we have a really fun story. From writer Christina Hoag comes Eyewitness. Christina is the author of novels Girl on the Brink and Skin of Tattoos, releasing in June from Onward Press. Her short stories and essays have been published in numerous literary journals, including Lunch Ticket, Shooter, San Antonio Review, and the Santa Barbara Literary Journal. A former journalist for the Miami Herald and Associated Press and foreign correspondent in Latin America, she recently won prizes for essay and fiction in the International Human Rights Arts Festival Literary Awards and the Soul-Making Keats Writing Competition. If you want to know more about Christina, you can check out her website, ChristinaHoagAuthor.com. She's also on Instagram at Christina Hoag Author. There will be a bunch of links in the notes as well. All right. If you like what we're doing here at Pocket Pulp, please rate, like, review, all that good stuff, and definitely share. And now, Eyewitness by Christina Hoag. Read by Eric Brian Moore. David Shatzkin blinked. Summer sun rays slashed through the slits in the teak blinds and flayed his eyes. He rolled over and picked up his phone on his bedside table. 9:37? Crap! He had hoped to sleep till noon. What time did he get home? 4:30? 5? He vaguely recalled the cabbie flying through a string of green lights up Park Avenue. His mouth was dry as stale pound cake. His temples throbbed. It was a hell of a night, all right. It seemed like he didn't miss a beat from 3 years ago when he and his 3 roommates were NYU seniors, starting weekends on Thursday nights and getting shit-faced around Greenwich Village. Mindful of the spears of pain in his head, David swung himself to a sitting position and belched stale beer and stomach acid. Ugh. Into the shower, dude, and coffee, lots of coffee. He stretched. Holy shit, what was that? He looked in alarm at his forearm. There was a bulge on the inside, just below the elbow. He pressed it. Firm, but not solid. Some kind of bruise? Had he hit his arm last night? If he did, it must have been a real wallop to create such a lump. He couldn't remember doing anything like that. It seemed like he should recall something that significant. Considering how many shots of J.D. he'd tossed back, maybe not. He staggered into the bathroom and turned on the shower faucets, twisting the hot water a notch higher than usual, as if the extra heat would purge his hangover. It didn't, but it helped. As he lathered himself for the second time to wash off the stubborn night, fragments emerged from the quicksand of his drunken memory, making out with a brunette in a hallway. Was that the second or third bar they'd gone to? Puking onto McSorley's sawdust-covered floor. Jesus, fucking embarrassing. That must have been when he bailed. It was his own fault, though. He'd kept ordering shots as his friends compared progress in their careers. He'd landed the most prestigious job after graduation and was easily making the most money, close to a 6-figure starting salary, as an equity research analyst for a Wall Street investment bank. But he hadn't moved beyond the entry-level position. The others were already climbing the ladder. Alex had won prizes for his series in a Nebraska newspaper about contaminated drinking water fountains. Jake was clerking for a federal judge. Jason had just been promoted to copywriter at an ad agency in Chicago, and David, well, now he was going to do what he always had vowed not to do: go to work for his father, one of New York's biggest commercial real estate developers. He had told his friends last night. They'd accused him of selling out, of being a hypocrite, of taking the easy path. It was all true. He slid the soap over his left arm and was immediately reminded of his new contour. It was a tumor, some kind of ridiculously fast-growing cancer. He leapt out of the shower and grabbed the towel. Heart pummeling like a boxer's fist, he switched on his desk lamp and studied it. It was the size of a mouse. David poked it. It didn't hurt, but it jiggled slightly. A herniated muscle? Was that possible? A cyst. He'd make an appointment with the doctor first thing Monday. He dried the rivulets of water dripping down the nape of his neck with the towel. As he lowered his arm, the skin over the lump peeled back. David froze. A brown eyeball stared at him. He yelped and reeled back, tumbling onto the bed. He saw his blanched face, the purple crescents under his eyes, the overhang of hair covering his ledge of a forehead. He squeezed his eyes shut and reopened them. It was like looking into a mirror. The eye was seeing him. He shook his arm like a rag doll, and the eye closed. Was he really awake? This had to be a nightmare. If it was, he needed to wake up now. He bit on his forefinger, hard. Oh, he was awake. The eye fluttered open. Panic seared him, then an uncontrollable jitter. Oh, stay calm, dude. Think. He was hallucinating. Could someone have slipped LSD into his drinks last night? Who would do that? Did he fight with someone? Possibly. Caffeine. That would clear his cobwebbed brain. He pulled on shorts and crossed his studio apartment to the kitchen. As he heaped a couple extra spoonfuls of coffee into the filter, he glanced at his arm. The eye opened, shut, opened, shut. The flash of vision made him dizzy. "Stop it!" he yelled. "Fuck off!" He was losing it, shouting at a figment of his imagination. Get a grip, dude. He could go to the emergency room. Maybe they could give him something. A straitjacket, that's what they'd give him. No, if this was a bad acid trip, he'd have to wait for it to wear off. How long could that be? A couple more hours? He must have slept through most of it already. He poured the coffee into a mug with Shatzkin commercial real estate striped across it and took a whiff of the milk. He recoiled. It was way past its expiration date. He'd have to go to Gristides. He could use some fresh air anyway. He threw on a T-shirt and a Yankees cap and headed down in the elevator. The Upper East Side was tranquil on a Sunday morning. Polite clinking and chatter buzzed from brunch bistros. Locals walking kennel show dogs and wheeling high-tech strollers, the 5-inch thick edition of the Times tucked under arm. He felt calmer, until perspiration bloomed in his armpits. Oh, Manhattan in mid-July. The heat turned into a stinking, cloying vapor as it rose off the asphalt. He should have gone to his parents in Southampton, skipped this fucking reunion. Flip-flops slapping his heels, David crossed 3rd Avenue to the Gristides. A homeless woman with a foam of matted hair and wearing more layers than his cousin's wedding cake stood outside the store. Her rank smell hit his nostrils as he tugged the door handle. Why don't these people go to a shelter, for God's sake? He stopped. He was in a hospital. The woman screamed as 2 orderlies tried to restrain her on a gurney. A doctor waited, holding a hypodermic needle aloft. She kicked off the sheet. Her legs were dotted with oozing sores. Fear shot through David. He didn't want to be jabbed with that needle. He wanted to go back to the street, be left alone. He was leaning against the wall outside Gristides, staring at a window ad for a sale on organic Bulgarian yogurt. He straightened and wiped his forehead with his T-shirt sleeve. This acid trip was really intense. How long could it last? On flimsy legs, he entered the store and bought the Times, milk, and a pound of Twizzlers on the notion that he should eat something despite his nausea at the thought of food. On his way out, he paused in front of the homeless woman, then gave her the remaining $20 in his wallet and the Twizzlers. "Don't ever go to the ER," he said. She snatched the bill, but not the candy, muttering what sounded like gibberish. His cell phone chirped as he rode the elevator up to his apartment. Caller ID read Jason. "Where are you, dude? Oh, we're all waiting for you." Brunch with the guys. He had forgotten all about it. Go ahead without me. I'm not feeling too great." "Oh, come on. Hair of the dog. We've got the Frisbee football challenge in the park this afternoon, remember?" "Shit. I'll meet you over there. Don't forget, we want to hear all about that hard body from last night." He laughed. "See you later." "Jace, wait. You ever drop acid?" You mean like LSD?" "Yeah." "Can't say I have. Why, you thinking of doing it?" "I think someone dropped LSD in my beer last night. Or maybe mushrooms, or some weird shit like that." "What? You really are tripping, man. You got one wicked hangover, that's all. Take a couple Tylenol PMs. It'll knock you out for a few hours. When you wake up, you'll be back on track, guaranteed." That was a damn good idea. David stirred. His eyelids were heavy with the residue of 3 pills. He remembered why he'd taken them and checked his arm. The mound was still there. The weight of worry descended upon him. David closed and opened his eyes again. Still there. It seemed to be mocking him. Fuck! He got up and looked out the window. 36 stories high. Starbursts of late afternoon sun glinted off the glass and metal of the skyscrapers. Glare washed out the Chrysler Building's peak. Down on the street, minuscule cars glided along as if shunted by an invisible force. David lurched into the kitchen. As he downed a glass of water, he looked at his arm. Maybe this thing wasn't a bad acid trip. Maybe it was some bizarre disease that affected 1 in 3 million people. His cell phone chimed. He jumped. "Dude, where the hell are you?" Jason shouted above crowd noise in the background. "You missed Frisbee football. We're on happy hour now." "I crashed. Just woke up." "We're at Sugar Reef on 2nd and 14th. It's like a Caribbean beach shack kind of place. Real cute servers. Get your ass over here." The day was passing him by. Fuck this thing. He was going to party. David walked into a paper lantern hanging too low from the restaurant ceiling. He batted it from his face, which was then assaulted by a dangling fake liana. He yanked on it, and a clump of it fell to the floor. Ignoring the customers' stares, he walked to the guys sitting around a corner booth, a pitcher of beer, and the debris of nacho demolition on the table. "You finally made it," Alex cried over the too loud salsa music. "Where you been all day, dude?" Jake slapped his back and poured him a glass of beer. "Here, get this down. Best hangover medicine there is." David guzzled the beer. It plummeted down his gullet and splashed into his stomach like a log flume. He was relaxing already. "Let's get some food. I'm starving." He snapped his fingers at the server. She scowled at him, but came over and took his order of buffalo wings. "So, what about that girl last night? Did you get her number?" Jason said. "I don't think so. Honestly, I don't remember much about last night." "If you didn't, you passed up a golden chance, dude," Jake said. "She was all over you, and she was cute." David took a long, cool draft of his beer. Then he saw it. Jake and a girl were lying amid a tangle of sheets, the cascade of curls sweeping her shoulders looking disturbingly familiar. So that's who Donna dumped him for. Son of a bitch. He'd introduced them, for Christ's sakes, at a party, one of the few times he'd seen Jake while he was at Columbia Law. David sputtered on his beer. Alex thumped him on the back. "Take it easy, big guy." David drained his beer and banged the glass down on the table. "So, how's Donna, Jake?" he asked as he grabbed the pitcher for a refill. Jake's face slid off his skull. So it was true. Good, he croaked. "She's good." Fucking asshole. Yeah, she's a good fuck, right? David said. Jake looked into his glass and cleared his throat. Listen, dude, Here comes the food. Alex made a boisterous show of making room for the platter of buffalo wings. Oh, let's eat. David scraped back his chair. Catch you guys later. They called for him to wait, to come back, not to be like that. He ignored them. He trudged up 2nd Avenue into the gauze of dusk. He wasn't hallucinating at all. The eye saw the truth. The next morning, David dragged himself off the elevator that served floors 50 through 80 and entered the glass doors of McClenahan Grass Hill. Suit jacket hooked on a finger over his shoulder, he shuffled through the worn of cubicles, replying to his coworkers' greetings with a limp smile. He entered his cubicle, where towers of 10Ks, 10Qs, proxy statements, and other assorted SEC filings awaited his perusal. The week's assignment was to write a market outlook on the aluminum industry for the Mergers and Acquisitions Department. Some big hush-hush deal was undoubtedly going on upstairs. Hey, David, how was your reunion? Delia's glacier blue eyes drilled him from over the shared wall of their cubicles. He had asked her out for drinks, twice, but she had made excuses both times. He got the hint. Great, a party down and all that. His voice trailed off as his vision swept him into an office. The M&A vice president was banging Delia on his desk. Her flailing arm knocked the photos of his wife and twin toddlers to the floor. Delia lay on a sheaf of papers headed Trump Loewy Inc., confidential. What's the matter? You look like you just saw a ghost. Her voice sounded like she was in a tunnel. What? Oh, nothing. How was your weekend? As she babbled about some indie movie, his brain whirred. Trump Loewy, the cosmetics company, on the M&A Veep's desk? David, are you listening to me? Yeah, just got a lot on my mind. You need more coffee, dude. Her head disappeared. David pivoted to his computer and logged into estock.com, entering Trump Loewy. The company report popped up. The stock price had crashed to a 5-year low, and the majority shareholders were pressuring the board of directors to oust the CEO, who was also the company founder, so he wasn't going easily. David leaned back in his chair. The shareholders and/or the board were probably looking for a buyer to recoup their investment. Hence, the documents on the M&A Veep's desk. That meant its stock price would skyrocket in short order. A tremor of excitement rippled through him. Should he? What the hell? He placed an order for $5,000 worth of Trump Loewy shares and settled into an aluminum company's 10K. Maybe this eye was useful after all. By the following morning, the bulge had disappeared. In a huge rinse of relief, David canceled the doctor's appointment he'd made and attributed the hallucinations to either a bad reaction to a Mickey someone had slipped him or some odd stress thing. As for Jake and Donna, he'd known it all along at some unconscious level, just didn't want to face it. And Delia? He must have overheard a mention of Trump Loewy, seen her talking to the M&A guy. He debated selling his Trump Loewy shares, but the price had dropped even lower. He decided to hold for the time being. It was only $5,000. On Thursday, a blurb cropped up on a Stockwatcher website that Trump Loewy was in takeover talks with a multinational consumer products corporation. The stock price zoomed. David watched the ticker tape crawl on the bottom of his screen with glee. By late afternoon, his $5,000 was worth $50,000. He waited until just before the closing bell and put in his sell order. He made another $12,000 in change. He punched his arms in the air in victory. Knock, knock. I take it that means you're almost finished with that aluminum report? Jerry was standing at his cubicle doorway. Almost done, he said. His vision flashed. Shit, it was happening again. He was in a bathroom. Jerry bent over the counter. She straightened, sniffing as she pressed a finger to her nostril. She swept a forefinger along an open, compact mirror, dabbing up traces of white powder. She licked her fingers, snapped the compact shut, and walked into the equity vice president's office, her eyelid twitching. The guy looked up. I need everything about retrovirals on the market and in R&D by Monday morning. That's when Pharma Ray is filling their patent. This is going to be big. Jerry felt a shot of hope. She needed cash to pay her dealer. He checked his arm. It was there. The bulge was back. An electric current of anxiety pinched him. David? Jerry squinted at him, sniffing. She did that a lot, come to think of it. How had he not noticed that before? Bad news. I need that aluminum report by tonight. Don't worry. Under control. Thanks. She left, swishing as her chubby, pantyhosed thighs rubbed together. He swiveled back and forth in his chair. Shit. How could this thing have returned? But wait, what had he seen? Jerry was a coke fiend? Interesting. More interesting was Pharma Ray. He typed the company name into stockwatch.com. It was a small-cap pharmaceutical R&D company in Bangor, Maine, of all places, formed by a couple of 20-something MIT PhDs who were obviously about to hit the big time. David invested all his money from the Trump-Loewy deal in Pharma Ray shares, then strolled to the break room. Delia straightened up from the water cooler. Big plans for the weekend? She said in a bored, making conversation tone. His smile was saccharine. No, but I bet you do. Desk jockeying with the M&A Veep, perhaps? Her eyes grew as big as an owl's. Gotta get back to work. She practically sprinted out of there. David felt a gleam of satisfaction as he sauntered back to his desk, fresh coffee in hand. Behind the pinstripes, McClenahan Grass Hill was a pretty interesting place. Who knew? At 5 o'clock, the cubicles emptied out like a toilet flush. He ordered Thai pad noodles on Grubhub and wandered over to Jerry's office where she was watering plants. I'll have that report for you shortly. She didn't bother looking up. Great. I've got to pull an all-nighter. Equity wants a report by Monday morning, so I need the aluminum thing ASAP. She plucked brown, crinkled leaves from a tendril of ivy drooping from a cabinet. By the way, how do you manage to stay awake all night? Oh, I'm used to it by now. David lowered his voice. Know what helps? A few lines of Bolivian marching powder. She hesitated for a fraction of a second, then yanked a fistful of green leaves off the ivy. I've never been into that stuff. Really? I thought you might have some of those things women carry in their purses, makeup mirror things. Jerry's eyelid twitched furiously. I don't know what you're talking about. David bounced on the balls of his feet. I've been meaning to talk to you about my career path. I'm way overdue for a promotion. I'd like to get into M&A. Jerry stared at him with a set jaw. Let's talk about that next week. Sure. Score one for Shatzkin. He returned to his cubicle. When Pharma Ray hit, he'd buy a Porsche Boxster, or maybe a Carrera. And make sure he swung by Donna's place. He'd make a couple of big hauls in M&A, then he could leave research reports in the dust and Shatzkin commercial real estate. He'd strike out on his own. Several mugs of coffee later, a squealing noise came down the hall. The janitor wheeled his cart outside David's cubicle and stopped to pick up the trash can. David looked up in annoyance. His vision flashed. The janitor was huddled in a crowd on a rickety wooden boat rolling on a nighttime sea, the white of his teeth and eyes stark in the darkness. The smell of vomit and body waste was acrid. A wave crashed over the boat. People screamed and clutched each other as the frigid water doused them. David gasped. His teeth chattered and his stomach roiled. He grabbed his jacket and, shoving aside the surprised janitor and his cart, fled. It was close to 11. The subway was baking with the day's grime-laden stuffiness. David slumped in the plastic seat, gazing at the blackness through the window as the train rocketed with a soothing rhythm. In the glass pane, he caught the reflection of a man entering the car from the one ahead. A chill gripped him. The man was being stabbed in the neck in an alley. Blood spilled over his hands as he tried to wrest the knife from his assailant. David gulped for air and erupted in a sweat. An angry red scar laced the man's neck. Wiping his clammy palms on his thighs, he averted his eyes. A woman with stringy hair and the complexion of a sponge sprawled on a seat. She seemed fixated on a gum wad on the floor. She jabbed a hypodermic needle into her upper arm below a rubber tourniquet. The liquid in the syringe swirled with blood. She depressed the plunger. Her head dropped like a rag doll's. A tide of nausea churned David's stomach. He clapped a hand over his forearm. He didn't want to see this stuff, this human flotsam and jetsam. He really didn't. It had nothing to do with him, but it was all around him. David woke to the sound of his alarm. He had to get to work early and finish the report before Jerry arrived. He felt drained. The eye's visions had crackled in a ghoulish kaleidoscope in his mind all night. He flung off the bed covers and padded to the bathroom. The solution came to him as he peed. He'd keep rolling up his sleeve at the office, but not in the street. That way he could stop the eye from seeing what he didn't want to see. Easy. Dawn was breaking as David hailed a cab. He didn't feel like chancing the subway again. He settled into the back seat and relaxed as the cab hurtled down Park. David looked at the taxi license on the glass partition. A bearded chin peeked around the door of a dark room. A little girl woke in her bed, but remained motionless, her senses sharpening like a blade as the man crept into the room and folded back the blanket. His hot breath was foul with tobacco. Dread bunched her stomach as he lifted her nightgown and passed calloused hands over her thighs. David screamed. The driver braked at a red light. David chucked a 20 at him and flung open the door in the middle of traffic. He skipped around the cars until he stood, panting on the sidewalk. That had been the worst vision yet. He looked down at his arm. It was covered by the sleeve. Had the eye seen through the fabric? Then he saw it. A lump on the back of his hand. His legs crumpled. Eyes stared down at him. A scream blasted out of his lungs. "Take it easy, buddy. Paramedics are on the way," the man said. All he could see was a forest of shoes and shins. He was lying on the sidewalk. He scrambled to his feet. The eye, he had to rip it out. He clawed at it. "I don't need a paramedic." "Calm down. You're going to make yourself bleed like that," the man said. "I'll be okay," David shouted. "I just have to get this out of me." "Buddy, there's nothing there." "Leave me the fuck alone," David glared at the man, who took several steps back, hands in surrender pose. David ran. He spotted the mouth to a subway station. He dived down the steps as a siren wailed behind him. It was so early, the office still had that hollow feel. David shoved his file cabinet into the doorway of his cubicle. He didn't want to see Jerry or anyone else. He didn't want the eye to see them. He didn't want to know anymore. He had almost finished the report's conclusion when he heard Jerry's voice. "David, are you in there? What are you doing?" A shadow filled the crack between the filing cabinet and the cubicle wall. "I'm finishing the report, like you wanted me to, remember?" "What's with the filing cabinet?" "I don't want to be disturbed. I'm getting this done." His voice was as taut as a violin string. Silence. David thought she'd left. But then she spoke. "Are you all right? You've been acting a little weird lately." "Of course I'm fucking all right. Are you? Snort enough coke last night?" "David, maybe you should go home. I think you're stressed out. Don't worry about the report. I'll take care of it. You take care of yourself. I will stay until I finish this fucking report." A beat of silence passed. "Take a deep breath. I'll be in my office." David typed the last line of the conclusion. He emailed the report to Jerry, along with a note that he was taking the rest of the day off as she had suggested. He had to take care of the eye. He knew what to do. Hugging the wall, David raced into his apartment building. He beelined for the huge potted palm in the lobby and squeezed himself behind it. He could hear the doorman whistling in the package room behind the concierge counter. "Hey, Felix." Felix stepped into the lobby and peered around. "David? That you?" "Yeah, listen, here's a 50. David extended the bill through the palm fronds. "Can you get me a fifth of Jack Daniels and bring it up to my apartment? Keep the change." Felix frowned as he took the bill. "Sure. Everything all right?" "Fine. Now, go back in the package room while I go upstairs. When you come up, just leave the bottle outside the door and knock, okay?" An hour later, David lowered the empty bottle onto the coffee table, but it missed and clunked onto the hardwood floor. His head spinning, he wobbled into the kitchen, bumping into the furniture. The floor was tilting like a carnival ride. He slammed into the wall. The blow reverberated, but it didn't hurt. Just what he wanted. He lay his hand, palm down on the counter, and fumbled for the butcher's knife. A meteor shower of pain streaked through his arm. David's eyelids flicked open. The haze of light from the moon and neighboring buildings through the window illuminated the room. He smelled something faintly metallic and realized he was lying on the kitchen floor in a thick puddle. Blood. He was naked except for his skivvies. Then he spotted them. 2 lumps on both his arms. The skin slid back, and baleful eyes glared at him. In double vision, he watched his mouth yawn wide in a scream. Thank you for joining us again this week. I hope you enjoyed Eyewitness by Christina Hoag. To learn more about Christina, you can check out the links in the notes or go to ChristinaHoagAuthor.com. And check us out on Facebook at Pocket Pulp, where we look forward to talking with and about the writers further. And we also have an Instagram account now at Pocket Pulp, and maybe one day my 6-year-old will actually teach me how to use it. If you're a writer and you'd like to have a story featured on Pocket Pulp, shoot us an email at pocketpulpsubmission@gmail.com. My name is Eric Brian Moore, Eric with a C, Brian with a Y, and you can follow me on Twitter at Eric Brian Moore, or check out my website, ericbrianmoore.com. Music by Bluemont Score and Eternal Producer from Pixabay. Thank you for joining us. And please share, like, subscribe, all that stuff really helps. I look forward to telling you another fantastic story next week.